Welcome to ELA's Wednesday Walks in the Garden. I'm Penny Lewis, Executive Director of the Ecological Landscape Alliance. We hope that these virtual garden walks add a bit of beauty to your day and inspire you to enjoy gardens in your area. On today's garden walk, we explore a primer on rain gardens with Amanda Sloan. Amanda is a landscape architect with 28 years of experience specializing in native plant gardens, rain gardens, and environmental design throughout New England. Amanda recently became an independent consultant and formed her own new company, Rain Garden Design Studio. Previously, Amanda worked as a landscape architect for Beta Group Inc. and before that as a landscape designer with Julie Moir Meservey Design Studio. Amanda has held many volunteer positions, including with the Sharon Garden Club and the Sharon Planning Board. She currently serves on the boards of the Ecological Landscape Alliance and Rolf Sylvan Gardens in Chatham, Mass. Welcome, Amanda.
And hello to everybody on this beautiful Wednesday. At least it's beautiful here in Massachusetts. And we have just had 2 days of torrential rain. So this is a very good topic for today here in New England anyway. So I want to invite you to stroll with me through a very basic session on rain gardens. And we're going to focus on small, non-engineered rain gardens that would be nice to do in a residential landscape or in a very small office type landscape. So welcome, and here we go. And I think Penny already went over that stuff. So as I said, this is going to be very basic information. We're going to be asking, what is a rain garden and why would we want to build one in our landscape? So it's based on simple concepts, and actually these concepts have been around for landscapes for centuries. The Romans did these sort of things too, and many other cultures around the world have done this. So basically the question is, if you have rain falling on a hard surface, a non-pervious surface, like pavement, like a street, like your driveway, and sometimes it can be torrential and it can flood. And here in the US, a lot of that rain will just go down into a street drain. Well, what if all that rain, instead of going into a drain, went into a garden? What if it was directed into a garden so that it didn't need to be piped away? And often those storm drains are piped into our local lakes, rivers, and if we're a coastal community, into the ocean. And that water will bring pollutants from the pavement into the water body. Salt, which is left from road salting in the winter, oil from cars. I was surprised to learn that tire rubber is actually one of the big pollutants that stormwater flushes will bring with it into water bodies. All kinds of chemicals and small pieces of garbage. So it's really troublesome when this happens. And similarly, the rain that falls on roofs. Roofs are a huge area of impermeable surface, unless we have a green roof, which not too many people have. Sheets off the roof and into the yard, into the landscape around it, pours down your driveway, into your garage or your basement, and sometimes it'll flood landscape areas like that big puddle in the grass there that you see. And something could be done with this rain rather than having it just sit there and flood. And so what if what we did was take all that rain and all that storm water and directed it into a garden type area, a depressed area in the landscape where it could be held for a little while, cleansed by the plants and by the actual soil that the plants are planted in, and then filtered down to replenish our underground aquifers. And on the left, you see it's kind of a nice model, I think, of what an aquifer is like. It's your groundwater. It's water held in porous stone, mostly deep in under the ground, but sometimes the aquifers can come quite close to the surface. And that is the water that we pump up. If we have a well, it will seep into lakes and rivers. It's a very important part of the water cycle. And our aquifers, all over the world, are becoming depleted these days because so much water is pumped up, so much water that would replenish the aquifer, like rain, is actually being piped into the ocean and into rivers. So it's a problem. So rain gardens work on a small local level to address these problems. And as I said, today I'm really going to be talking about small non-engineered rain gardens. There is a whole area of engineering called stormwater engineering where much larger facilities for holding and treating water are built. And they often have piping and overflows and that sort of things. But for your residents or for your very small business, just a small, simple rain garden will perform all of those duties without much trouble. So, our problems with climate change, which is creating more frequent and abundant rainstorms, flooding everywhere. And all that flood water is picking up pollution, which is going into our rivers and oceans. And those are two images just showing you that. And then, as we said, the depletion of the aquifers. That dry well on the left there is actually a well in California. As you know, if you read National Geographic, a few years ago, they did a whole issue on the depletion of our large aquifers in this country. It's a real problem for farmers, for all of us. And many places out west are going dry like that dry well. On the right, you see a New England town that, like many towns here on the East Coast, they pump water from their aquifers for the town. And when those aquifers get depleted, either because of drought or because people are pumping too much, then we have to have a water ban. And many towns around where I live have water bans in the summer. So just to sum that all up, a simple rain garden is a green, non-invasive, habitat-enhancing way to help your landscape handle stormwater and to benefit the environment. So not only does a rain garden handle stormwater problems, but because it's planted, it also creates a habitat for pollinating insects, for birds, for all of those creatures, butterflies that we need to have around us, and also it creates beauty. And here's a rain garden that shows that. It's this. We're going to look at this one a little bit more later on, but it's at the end of a driveway that slopes way down, and rain was pouring down that driveway every time it rained and just puddling at the bottom. And so what we did was we created a rain garden, and the rain garden part of it is the one, I'm actually going to use my cursor to circle it. It's here. It's all planted with native plants. This is late in the season, so you see goldenrod and grasses. And the water can just flow right in there. And then we've created some other garden elements around it to really make it beautiful. And rain gardens are now an accepted practice. Maybe 20 or 30 years ago, or even less than that, people were still questioning, do these things really work? And is this just some kind of, artifice or fashion? But no, engineers have really studied these, and they work really well, and they've been well researched. So you're finding that everyone from the EPA on down offers grants and programs to support the use of rain gardens, from really large ones, large engineered ones, to tiny little rain gardens right in your home landscape. This little announcement is from Rochester, New York. And particularly the watershed organizations have seen how beneficial rain gardens are to keep pollution away from the rivers, and to keep the rivers stocked with water. And so watershed organizations all over the country will offer grants for rain gardens. And all you need to do is sort of do a web search, and you're going to find this kind of information about grants. So I guess you would ask yourself the question, well, I'm striving for an ecological landscape in my yard. Would a rain garden fit well for me? And so we're going to look at some of the basics of rain gardens to help you answer that question. So going way down to the basics, a rain garden is a particular type of water garden, and you can see at the top there, that's a rain garden. It rained all day the day before that, and it filled, and now the water is filtering down because the bottom of the rain garden is porous. The bottom photo shows a pond, and so a pond is not a rain garden. A pond has usually an impermeable lining to keep the water in, and it may have a circulation system to keep things oxygenated for fish and creatures who might be living in there. But a rain garden is very different from a pond. So that's a beginning to understand. So if you took a slice through a rain garden down into the earth, this is sort of a representation of what you would see. The rain is falling on a non-porous surface like pavement to the left there, and it's going to flow. The pavement or roof is going to be angled a little bit so that the rain flows down, and it's going to flow first across what we call the forebay, structures to catch and hold large pieces of garbage, silt, very, very fine soil particles. And then it's going to flow into this very flat-bottomed basin, which is planted, where it will collect and then slowly start to filter down. And it will reach the aquifer, which, as I said, is this porous rock that holds a lot of water way down beneath the Earth's surface. And so, by the way, all of the images of rain gardens that you'll see in this webinar are ones that I designed and did. So I know all of these very, very well. And this one is one of my favorites. It's in some public housing, actually, in Providence, Rhode Island. And those two little girls, I think they're probably grown-ups by now, but they were very interested and they wanted to care for the garden. And they had a watering can that they would bring out to water the plants when they first got planted to help them get established. But this is a really good image of, sort of all the concepts of a rain garden. It's a depression in the earth rather than a mound on the earth. And if you think about the way we usually design and build our garden plots, our garden areas, we usually mound them up. But no, a rain garden is going to be sunk down into the earth so it can catch and hold the water. And then the water is going to be cleansed. And the way that happens is actually, it's a lot more to do with the soil that's used in the garden than the plants. The plants can do some what we call phytoremediation, which means they will soak up chemicals and pollutants and hold them in their tissues. But it turns out that the main function of plants in a rain garden is actually their roots. To hold the soil and to help filtrate the water going down and to create that habitat for pollinators and other animals. The real substance in a rain garden that helps clean the pollutants out of the water is you can call it the filtration medium or the planting medium. It can be specially mixed for your rain garden. When we get into larger, more technical rain gardens, we will often look at the pollutants that are actually coming into the rain garden at that particular place. And then we can design the filtration or soil medium to actually bind those chemicals and hold them. And that's really how a rain garden works, is that it's a chemical process that happens in the soil. Now, for a residential rain garden, often you're just going to be using the soil that's there already, as long as it percolates okay. And that just means that the water does filter down, way down into the aquifer. It's not held, it's not puddling. But you can use an engineered medium at your home if you decide you want to do that. So the water should filter down in a properly constructed rain garden really very fast. So no more than 24 hours. And some rain garden specifications will tell you that it should hold the water for no longer than 72 hours, which is 3 days. And that's okay. We're going to talk a little bit later on about mosquitoes and what sort of limits you need to set to discourage mosquitoes. So you really want to try to make your rain garden filter the water down as fast as possible. So this rain garden here, you can see on the left, it's filled with water. You can see the reflection of the water there. But at the end of the day, the photo on the right, and I'm going to use my cursor again. So this area is the flat bottom area of the rain garden. And over here, it's this area here. And you can see it's completely dry. Everything went down. And that's the way your rain garden should work. And here's a view of another one, just to sort of emphasize the point. You can see the water in there. You can see the reflection. But within a few hours, that is all going to filter down. On this one, you can, the forebay is actually very obvious that those preliminary filtration strips that I talked about. Here is the gravel area. And this one has silted up just a little bit, so it's going to need raking out. That is one of the care aspects of a rain garden. And then you have your grass strip here. So anything that's sheeting off the permeable surface that's here will be sheeting across there and catching garbage and fines here, flowing through the grass and then into the rain garden. And the rain garden's going to empty within a day. So now that we sort of understand how a rain garden works, and you're thinking that you might Pardon me, my phone is ringing. And I can't make it stop. So just ignore that. It'll stop after a minute. So looking around your yard, it is important to site the rain garden properly. As they say with real estate, it's location, location, location with rain gardens. So if you're looking around your yard and you're trying to find a good place for a rain garden, you want to find a place where the rainfall can easily flow. So it might be at the end of your gutter. You may want to extend your gutter out into your yard because you can't put the rain garden too close to your house. It might be a place where there's a swale in your yard that sort of ends in a place where there's a lot of filtration in the lawn. It might be a place by the side of a driveway or your sidewalk. If it's a little bit slanted sideways, the rain may be sheeting off the driveway to the side, and that's an awfully good place for a rain garden. If you have a street drain or even a drain like right before your garage or elsewhere in your property, if you can put the rain garden between where the drain is and where the rainfall is sheeting down, then you can catch it before it goes down the drain, and that's such an important environmental function. If you have a place in your yard where, as I said before, it's pretty porous and the rainfall collects temporarily, it puddles temporarily, but after a day it's gone, that is a very good place. And since most of the plants we're going to plant in a rain garden really do prefer sun, it should be a sunny place rather than a very shady place. And this is an important slide because it feels intuitive that, if a rain garden is going to collect water and hold water, well, you think to yourself, maybe I have this wet spot in my garden anyway. Maybe I should use that place for the rain garden. But in fact, that's not a good place for a rain garden because if it's permanently wet, that means there's not good percolation going down. So if you have a low spot, a muddy spot, a spot that's always mushy when you step on it, if it's a wetland edge, I've even heard of people who have natural springs coming up in their yard. Those places are not good for rain gardens. And likewise, if you know you've got ledge or a strip of clay pan, a chunk of clay pan under your lawn, that would not be a good place for a rain garden. If you're near a lake and your groundwater is pretty close to the surface, you want to try to find a place in your yard that's a little more upland than that. The reason is because you really want the water to clean before it goes down into the aquifer, and that takes some, filtering through a distance of soil. You don't want it any closer than 10 feet to your basement. If it's an underground basement, because that water could get into your basement through cracks or, just seeping through. So you don't want to be holding water closer than 10 feet to an underground basement. And no closer than 25 feet from a septic system if you're on septic, or a well if you've got a well for your water. Once again, we just don't want to contaminate either the rain garden or the well or the septic by cross contamination between the two water sources. And probably not under a tree, because you're going to be having to cut roots if you do that, and you really don't want to do that. Two really important things are you want to perform a perk test. So that's a test to make sure the water is filtrating properly. And you need to know where your underground utilities are because, it's similar to any other landscaping going on at your residence. You don't want to dig into a gas pipe or an electric line or something like that. So let's look a little closer at those two. To do a perk test, all you need to do is find where locate where you want to do your rain garden, and just take a spade and dig a hole. It doesn't have to be any wider than maybe 8 to 12 inches, and dig it down 6 to 8 inches, and then just fill it with water, with a hose or a jug of water or whatever, and then just wait 6 hours and go check. If the water is gone, the filtration is doing really well there, and that's a good place. If the water is still there, but it's going down, it's probably a fine place, but you may need to bring in some of that filtration medium to put in the bottom of your rain garden rather than just use your local soils, the soils that are there already. And just remember, if you have a new house that's been recently constructed, or you're living in a new apartment building that was just put up, your soil all around that is going to be compacted from the building equipment, and that may affect your perk test. So if you think your soil is very, very compacted, you want to get down to a level where there's no compaction, and you may need to bring in some of that the amended filter medium rather than using the soil that's there, or you may just want to really fork it up as well as you can and get it nice and fluffy. And to check your underground utilities, here in New England, you just call 811. That's dig safe. I'm sure many of you know this already. And they will come out. You need to dig. You need to call 3 days before you plan to dig, and all the different utilities that are on record for your property will come out separately and mark using spray paint usually where those underground utilities run, so you can avoid digging there. And in other states, I don't know of a number that you call, but I'm sure if you do an internet search, you'll find that number. So just be sure you avoid locating your rain garden where there might be a wire or a pipe or something underground. And here's a siting example. So this is that rain garden that we looked at before. This woman came to me and she said, my driveway angles down from the road quite sharply right into my garage, and I have a little parking area that goes off to the left there, and after a rainstorm, it's completely flooded. But after a day or two, the rain is all gone. And I said, well, I think a rain garden would be a really good solution here. And you can see that she's already got gutter pipe extending out. And I'll use the cursor. So this is where we put that rain garden. And then she had a deck up here. So we constructed, some stone steps, some nice country looking stone steps, and some more shrubbery along here. But she already had a way to get the water from her roof out into the garden. And then the rainwater would just wash down the driveway, take a sharp left turn, and got rid of this edge, and it would just flow right into the rain garden. And there's the photo you saw before. The water just came in this way, and this pipe actually goes underground now, but it goes all the way through here. So this is catching the water, and no more flooding for her, and some beauty to look at from her deck. So let's take a closer look at the parts of the rain garden now that we're thinking about where to locate one. As I explained before, so you're going to have some non-porous surface. In this case, it's pavement, but maybe there's a house right here with a roof and a gutter pipe or a rain chain that's coming down, and you're going to need to direct the rain out to where the garden is, and it's going to be 10 feet or more from the side of the house. Now, these 4 bays, Not every residential rain garden manual that you find online is going to ask you to put those in. They're something that are almost a requirement for a more engineered rain garden or a larger, like a municipal rain garden. I like to use them for residential rain gardens also because I think they serve a really important purpose, which is to really, take out the very chunky, big garbage, the Kleenex that you threw down, your face mask, we got face masks all over the landscape now. So these structures will just catch those before they flow into the garden. And it's harder to clean that kind of garbage out of a sunken garden like a rain garden than it is just to pick it up off the side there. But also, as we're going to see in some of the rain garden images coming up, they can really add some beauty to the garden, and they can add some organization to the garden, to some visual structure to the garden. And then you've got your slope here. And we just try to make that gentle enough so that the filter strip is not going to fall into the rain garden. We have about 6 inches of ponding area. For a residential garden, you're not going to be asking it to catch a torrential hurricane, storm water that's, in a 100-year storm or something like that. We're really going to be asking it to hold 1 to 3 inches of storm water. And so pretty much all you need is to sink it about 3 to 8 inches into the ground. And so you've got your ponding area, or we call that freeboard. And then you're going to have about 12 inches of planting medium, AKA filter medium. And this might be your local soils if they're kind of sandy. If your perk test has gone well and everything went down. And then on top of that, you're going to put 3 inches of mulch, wood mulch, aged wood mulch. That can be controversial. People who are really technically involved with rain gardens, some people will say, don't put mulch in it because that is going to add nitrogen as it decomposes. I do like to use mulch because, especially in a residential rain garden, it adds to the filtration. It protects the plant roots. And you may find after a few years that your plants get big enough that they really fill the whole bottom surface of the garden, and then you don't need mulch anymore. But especially at the beginning, you want to protect the roots and add to the filtration by using a bit of mulch. That's what I say anyway. And then I really like to place some kind of very natural looking, either boulders or it could be a bunch of other things we'll look at later on in the slideshow. But something to make an edge to the garden, something that makes it look natural. The plants can kind of froth around it, and you can sit on it and take a look at your garden also, which is nice. To calculate the size and depth, now we already talked about depth, so we're going to talk 6 to 8 inches with that. We're going to allow about 24 inches of total width at the receiving edge of the garden, so the edge where the water's flowing in. You could go up to 36 inches width on that for your gravel and your grass forebay. And you'll note that the gravel infiltration trench, it really is an infiltration trench here. So this one is actually about 18 inches across and 18 inches down. And the gravel that I use for this is not just your normal gravel that you can get from the stone yard, but the gravel pieces want to be about 1 inch or less in dimension and smooth and rounded. And what that will do is create voids in between the gravel pieces that will hold the water. If you use angular gravel, it's going to pack down, and it's really not going to allow that trench to sort of start to catch the water. And that's really your aim. You want to do that. So let's see. So we talked about a foot of either your fluffed up local soil or your, if you didn't have, a really good perk test, but you still want to put the garden there, maybe some mixed soil filtration medium that you can get from your local, stone yard or a soil company. There are many of them now that will mix this for you. And don't be surprised if it comes looking a lot like sand, because sand is an important ingredient. It will, it's much more porous, and sand turns out to be a really good soil type to grab those chemicals, to bind those bad chemicals that we want to hold in the rain garden and not allow to get down into the aquifer. That is a whole nother level of understanding, but sand is really good in your rain garden. And another thing you could do if you're wanting to help it perk more is lay a layer of this same round gravel underneath that. So you could put 6 inches, you could even go down to 12 inches. Say you have a small piece of clay pan that's just in part of where you want the rain garden to go, and you could just dig that up and put gravel in there instead. So for detail on sizing, UConn has a great resource. The link I've put there is the link to sizing the rain garden. And then there's a whole how-to guide there that's really, really good. And I think at this point, I also did want to point out and emphasize that this can be a source of some disagreement among experts, but I feel that rain gardens need to have a flat bottom. They need to be evenly flat all the way around, and the top edge, so the top of your freeboard here, needs to be evenly graded all the way around, so that water can't spill out of it. There are some diagrams you'll see online that show a rain garden with a bowl-like bottom, and I'm tracing that with my cursor here. I discourage doing that, because with a bowl-like bottom, you're going to get, the water is just going to collect at this very bottom here, and you're going to get mud and fine pieces of earth, and it's going to get all silted up down there. A lot of diagrams that will show a bowl-shaped rain garden will also advise you to plant wetland plants in this very bottom section that will remain wet with a bowl shape. And I've done a lot of rain gardens, and in my experience, wetland plants do not work well in a rain garden. A rain garden should actually be dry most of the time. Now, that's why we really try to create this plumb flat bottom where the water can filter down equally across this whole expanse. And we're going to talk more about the plants in a little while. And here's just a plan view. It's a little more technical to look at, but so this is the edge of the rain garden here. Here are the boulders that have been placed around it, and these fuzzy things are the plants that are in it. And you can see around the edge, so we've got a parking area here and a sidewalk here. And both of those impervious surfaces sheet off into the rain garden. And so this little hatch here shows grass. So this is the grass part of the forebay all the way around here, because we've got water coming from here and from here. And then along here, we've got a hard edge of our gravel infiltration strip. But what we did was make it kind of pretty in plan view. So it's got these, oops, got to go back there. It's got these pretty waves to it. So it almost looks like a Japanese garden. And it almost looks like it was just put there to look pretty, but it was put there for a technical purpose, which is to infiltrate the rain sheeting off here. And in fact, we covered that. We used the round stone, the round 1-inch stone underneath, and then we covered it with larger washed river stone. So it really looks pretty there. So let's go over some common concerns about rain gardens. The first one we mentioned before is mosquitoes. Will this water that looks like standing water breed mosquitoes? A second one is because we try to plant native plants in there that will withstand a lot of different conditions. We're not really planting well-bred nursery plants in there. So some people feel that it can look kind of messy, and we'll look at a few solutions to that. We talked already about what kind of plants do we use? Do we use wetland plants? Do we use dry plants? And we'll go over that a little bit again. And then how do I maintain it, and how long will it function? So we saw these slides before. So I did a little research on mosquitoes. And so mosquito eggs can hatch in, as short as 24 hours up to 2 or 3 days to hatch when they're laid in water like that. But then the larvae need to swim around in still water for about a week. So you're really talking about a female mosquito is looking for a place where there's still water that will last for at least a week. And as we said, rain gardens filter down and are dry much sooner than that. So mosquitoes really have not been shown to be a problem with rain gardens at all. And so in this photo, this is the rain garden here. And there's a impervious surface here that's sheeting off, and you can see the forebay, the gravel and the grass here before it falls into there. But we've taken some time to add some structure. So although this rain garden has curvy edges, it does just wrap around the corner of this drive where the rain is sheeting off. And it's planted with these native plants that really froth up quite a bit. So next to it, we've put a little boulder seating area with a tight arc of a circle, just to define things a little bit, give things a little bit of neatness. This was very soon after this was planted, and actually in here, it's not lawn grass, it's native sedges. So they're taking a little time to get established there, but you can see how placing garden objects, be they natural or from an artist or something like that, starts to organize this rather exuberant planting of native plants. Here's another look, and this is the one where we saw the plan of it a few slides back. Just the placement of some boulder groupings and the careful placement of your forebay. And here, there's nice rigid bench, just with a back that just backs up on the garden, and everything starts to feel less messy. So I would just say, use your design sense and your creativity, because a rain garden is really like any other part of your garden. And you can put, a wonderful gate, a trellis, pieces of garden furniture, beautiful garden urns. All those kinds of things can go in a rain garden and just make it look like a regular part of your beautiful garden. So the plants you need to use are plants that withstand short periods of inundation with water and long periods of dryness. And here in New England, we often will experience a couple of months of drought in the summer, and I know elsewhere in the country, the same is the case. And unless you're just establishing your plants at the very beginning of planting, you really don't want to water them. So I often tell people, look at your roadside native weeds, and those are the ones you should use in your rain garden. So goldenrod, rudbeckias, um, different types of native grasses, oxeye daisies, and you can look at the taller ones and the shorter ones, but those really tough natives are the ones that you should use. Here, we've got a nice big clump of Jacob Klein bee balm in the center. Super tough plant. It looks kind of, moist, but it attracts birds and it lasts and it goes on year after year. Not sure what the rest of it is off the top of my head, but anyway, so this is the type of planting you want. You really don't want to put a wetland plant in a rain garden. Here are some that you could use. This is kind of an older slide, but some of the ones I mentioned, the yarrows, the liatris. You can use shrubs like sweet fern, even bearberry and low bush blueberry at the edges of the garden. Steeplebush is a great one. Now, the one that is classified as a semi-wetland plant on this slide is cardinal flower, Lobelia cardinalis. It does love to grow in wetlands, but it's very adaptable. So if you can find a plant like that, that's really fine also. The maintenance is going to be almost exactly the same as your regular garden bed. So your garden beds that are mounded up are going to be the model for how you would take care of your rain garden, except it's depressed down. And so, you're going to water the plants when they're first put in, mulch it as long as you have sort of bare looking areas in there. Do not ever fertilize it because that just puts more chemicals into the ground. And after a few years, you should have a really thriving garden that's all full, doesn't need any more mulch, and waters itself when the rain comes. And the only thing that you need to watch, which is not part of a regular garden bed, is the forebays. If you have them, you will want to pick the garbage out of that and probably rake it out. If it starts to silt up a bit, you probably just want to rake out some of that fine stuff and keep it so that it percolates well. So it looks as though from research that's being done, and this is still happening, that the rain garden filtration medium and filtration structure can last for probably about 25 years. So you've got enough chemical binding going on of the bad stuff and filtration going on that the garden will function to hold the bad stuff and filter the clean water down for about 25 years. So that's a really good amount of time for any garden. Most landscapes are redesigned, much quicker than that. So it's a good practice from that standpoint also. And now we're just going to have some very quick slides showing construction of a rain garden so you can really get a good look at it. And this one is not a residential one, but it's a small one. And so you can have your landscaping company come in and dig this for you. And, you want to spray out the outline on the ground. And, that one, it's a pretty curvy outline, but you could, if you want to have a rectangular one, you can do that too. Or, if you're strong, you can bring in some strong teenagers and the soil is not too compacted, you can dig out a rain garden because you're not going down that deep unless you are unless you are adding the filtration medium. Now this garden, we were going to add filtration medium. So he went down probably about 24 inches and he just sliced it down at the side there with his bucket. And then this soil was hauled away, or actually I think it was used elsewhere on the property. And then we had our mixed soil medium brought in. If it's a small rain garden, it won't be a pile as big as that. But if you do have it brought in, it's probably going to come on some kind of a truck. And if you can get it dumped right into the garden, that'll avoid a lot of shoveling. Oh, just a little interruption here. If you have any final questions, now would be the time to send them in, and we'll have a question and answer session at the end. And then for this garden, we did use some boulder clusters around the edge to make it look pretty. So this guy was able to use an attachment on his excavator to move and place those boulders. You're certainly, if you want boulders, I doubt you're going to be able to move them yourself. So you probably will need someone with at least a bobcat to come in and help you place those. And there's the garden ready for planting. So you can see it's cut right down at the edge. There's very little slope going on there. The gravel part of the forebay has been placed. This is going to be the grass part of or sedge part of the forebay. The boulders have been placed, and this is the top of the planting medium here. So you can see it's 6 inches down. So when the rain flows in, it can puddle up to 6 inches there. And then the plants can be placed. This one, the view of this garden will be mostly from this side where the cursor is, in like that. So the taller plants are back here and some shrubs too. And then, plants get lower and lower. And then this is a different rain garden, but it's showing what it looks like when the plants are planted. And you can see those are baby plants. There's a lot of space between them, but there's a whole lot of nice mulch in between those. And these young ladies are the ones that did all this planting by hand. This was a school. So this is what it will look like right after it's planted. And you can see here, so here's the impermeable surface, your gravel part of the forebay. The grasses and sedges will go here, and then the water just flows right in like that. So that's the end. I hope that gives you some ideas. And I think this slide will stay up while we answer questions. At the top, you have the link to that University of Connecticut. It's an online manual which has a lot of good information about rain gardens. And if you have any further questions specifically about this presentation afterwards, what you can do is use a feature we have on the Ecological Landscaping Alliance website. It's called Ask an Eco Pro. And you just go to that link below and you can type in your question and we'll try to take as many of them as we can. Thank you.
Excellent. That was a great overview, gave us lots of tips, Amanda. And we do have several questions from our folks who are tuned in today. The first is just a reiteration. I will be sending out a link to the recording for this. So if you missed the URL to that Yukon calculator for sizing your rain garden, you'll be able to see that when you review the recording. We had a couple of questions that you answered already that came in ahead of time, making sure that you are 10 feet from your house. That was a great thing to know. The next is, what species of native plants would make the garden attractive as well as habitat rich? And I think that you've covered that, but is there anything else you would like to add to that discussion?
I would just reiterate to bear in mind that if you're buying native plants, you want to try to buy the species plant, so something that isn't too inbred. And often those species plants will be a little bit rangy. They might flop a bit when they go up. And so you want to, try to tolerate that and maybe use some design strategies to accommodate those kinds of things. So you could cluster colors together. That sort of gives your garden more of an organized look. You can use some tall native grasses to frame things, maybe next to the boulders to kind of give the garden a little edge. And what else? I think, and look at the shapes and the textures of the leaves, and just try to think a little bit out of the box on that, I would say. I think, most of the native plants you're going to buy are going to be hosts to one pollinator or another, or they're going to provide seeds for birds for the winter. So you almost can't go wrong, I think.
Yes, I think that's good advice. What materials do you use? And we have a few questions around this. One is dealing with the grass strip. If you could just review what that purpose is and whether or not you could use any other native ground covers in lieu of traditional turf grass.
Yes, I love that question. And this is something I'm very interested in too. And I've been trying different plants. So once again, that part of the forebay is just to provide almost a finer net for garbage that's in the water before it gets into the garden. It's just, a more refined step in the filtration process, in the across ground filtration process. And as I said, I've started using sedges. So if you're using a lawn grass, and you can get ecological lawn grasses now. Let's see, Colonial Seed, I think, has one with a native grass in it, and they're across the country, there are a whole bunch of different ones. So if I'm going to use a lawn type grass, I'm going to use something that has very deep roots, that's a kind of a low mow grass, and I'm going to seed it into the filter strip area there. If I'm using sedges, I'm going to use Pennsylvania sedge, Appalachian sedge, something that's fine and pretty low growing. I've been thinking about trying to use, it's called Juncus tenuis, I think, path sedge, even though it's a juncus. It'll grow, and I think it'll grow just anywhere. So if anyone tries that, I'd love to know. But those probably all need to be planted with plugs. Plugs close together. But I've also thought about ferns, hay-scented fern maybe, which might take over your whole rain garden if you let it, but or bearberry. So I think experimenting with that part of the forebay is a great thing, and it would be wonderful to have something other than grass there.
Okay. We have a few questions about the mulch that you recommended. If you could remind us what the depth of the mulch is, and a follow-on question Does the mulch have to be wood chip, or could it be something like a crushed gravel mulch?
Very interesting question. So I usually use 3 inches of well-aged wood mulch. I even, sometimes if you're in a residential area where you're near woodland, every once in a while you might have a tree or two taken down on the edge of your yard, and I ask them to chip it and leave it, and I let that age at the edge of my yard for a while, and then I can use that for mulch. And the reason you want to age it well is so that it's not exuding all of these, nitrogen and phosphorus and everything, that it becomes more chemically stable. And before we get to the fine gravel, you just want your mulch, like you don't want to use cocoa shell mulch or rice hull or, anything that's too light and that will float. Because when the water pours into your garden, that kind of stuff is just going to float on the surface. You want something that's going to be sort of fibrous and that will soak up the water and, filter it down and really stay down on the surface of the planting filtration medium. I don't see any reason why you shouldn't use fine, fine like a rice stone or something like that. The only thing I would say is that I think if it's very light colored, it can reflect, actually, no matter what color it is, stone can reflect a lot of heat. So that might make a less amenable environment for your plants, especially when they're babies. So you might want to think about using something more organic, that will stay kind of moist and give more of a forest duff type surface to the bottom of the rain garden.
Okay, we have one comment here: when you're shopping for native plants, to make sure that the nursery you're buying them from does not use or does not buy from suppliers who use neonics that can harm the pollinators. So thank you for that great suggestion.
Very, very important. Yes.
Yes. We have another question. Are you taking new clients for rain garden designs?
Well, such a personal question. Actually, for me, it is personal because I'm sorry to say that this year I am not taking on any new clients because I have my first grandchild arriving this summer very soon. And we're going to be spending a lot of time with my daughter, helping her care for this little tyke. And so I'm setting aside my work hat for just until the end of the year anyway. But there are a lot of people who do great rain garden design, and I might be willing to take on some new work next year. I also strongly urge you to look on the Ecological Landscaping Alliance website, and there's a tab there called Find an Eco Pro. And if you go there, you can search through any state. They're members of ELA who all have businesses. The businesses are well described there and their contact information. So go ahead and sort through that and see if you can find somebody near you who might be able to help you with a rain garden.
Great, great suggestion. We have a few people who have asked about whether it's possible to create a rain garden in partial or full shade.
Yes, so absolutely. So the most important thing is that is that you've got good percolation there, that the water will go down. And you also want to think about like what is causing the shade, because if it's in the shade of a building, unless it's starting to get 2 or 3 stories high, that shade might be just too close to the building. If it's building on slab, that's fine, you know, if there's no basement. But and if it's in the shade of a large tree or a woodland edge, once again, if you dig a garden there, you're probably digging within the root zone of the tree, because, you know, tree root zones don't go down as much as they go out to the drip line of the tree, at least. Maybe towards the edge of a drip line where you're only disturbing very fine, you know, secondary roots. That would be okay. So you want to think about, you know, what am I close to if I'm in shade? You want to do your perk test, and then you need to think carefully about the plants, because, as I said, most of the plants that really do well in rain gardens are sun-loving plants. And, you know, for a shady rain garden, so it might be a little more moist because it is in shade, but you're probably looking at dry, shade-loving natives. And that's a much smaller category than a lot of other plants. So that's the best I can say about that. Yeah.
Yes, very good. What happens in a rain garden with snow in the wintertime?
Oh, such a great question. So, and I'm so glad you asked it because that's something I neglected to mention. So if you have a snow storage area, which most likely it will be next to a you know, an impervious surface like your driveway or your patio or something like that, where snow is being plowed or shoveled off it and piled, that is also very likely a place where you want to locate your rain garden. So that's okay as long as you don't have huge piles of snow that are all full of dirt and salt, and, you know, that are maybe street plowings, or you know, if you salt your driveway, which my personal bias is never use salt in the landscape for any reason, but if you do, you don't want that going into your rain garden. So under a sort of a formal snow storage area is not a good place for a rain garden. But if it's just out in your landscape and the snow falls on it, that's fine. In fact, you know, heat comes up from the earth. So you will find sometimes that if snow falls on your rain garden and the top gets sort of all iced over, down towards the bottom, things are going to be more melted because the earth is always radiating warmth. So that kind of snow is okay.
Okay. Do you have a recommendation for the growing medium, a specific soil medium blend, and how much sand or compost to add?
Yes, well, this is an area of great, I wouldn't say controversy, but different people have many different ideas about this. Now, here in the Boston area, Reed Custom Soils mixes does a specific rain garden mix. And it's a very nice one. To me, I would even add more sand to it than they do, but it works very well. And you could probably, you know, Google and look for companies around where you are that will mix you a specific rain garden mix. Now, when I'm specifying my own mix, I specify up to 80% sand. And it looks like builder's sand when it comes in. And mixed with that is some compost for for plant nutrition when the plants are first getting started, and you know, a small amount of just regular nice garden loam. So my personal bias is to err on the side of sand. if you're going to mix up your own mix. And if you're looking online and you find a company that will make a mix for you, they should be able to give you the percent composition of the mix. And if you don't like it, if it's like only 40% sand or something, ask them to mix something really custom for you. Just say, I want some more sand. My perk test went a little slow, and I'd like some more sand in it than that.
Good suggestion. We've had a couple of people inquire about how to determine where your groundwater level is.
Yeah. So it's not that easy, but I think if you have a high groundwater level, you probably will know it because you're probably getting a flooded basement. You probably have a sump pump in your basement, and then if your groundwater level is really high, whenever you dig like more than 2 or 3, like say you're planting a tree or a shrub or something in your yard, when you dig down, the bottom of the hole is going to fill with water. Now, if it's, down 5 feet or less than that, you probably the flooded basement is the best indication. But you can call your DPW and ask them if they've got, sometimes the GIS maps now, the state GIS maps show the geology of areas and where groundwater is. So maybe just a chain of phone calls will lead you to the right place for that.
Okay. We are running out of time, so we're only going to be able to take a couple of these questions. You mentioned using shrubs, and a couple of people have asked specifically if you can use evergreens.
Oh, yes. You just want to do a little research to make sure that the evergreen can withstand sitting in water for a day or two. Like I know rhododendrons don't like that. They really just don't enjoy sitting in water. They want something that's well drained all the time. Likewise, an evergreen that can withstand periods of drought. So some of your more wetland oriented evergreens, let's see, the laurels, the hollies, some of those. If you're in an area where you really can expect like 3 or 4 weeks of no rain in the summer, you need to be careful about that. But sure, and the other thing is the bigger the plant gets, the bigger the roots are going to get. So you just want to be sure that the plant is located in a place where if the roots really do start to spread out, roots are not a problem in a rain garden, but if they start to spread out, they're not going to disturb the hydrology that's going on there.
All right. And our final question, we have a couple of folks who have asked about whether there is chemical contaminant buildup over time, or do the plants somehow break down those toxins?
Yeah, such a good question, and that's sort of a level up from your simple residential garden. But yes, so what the plants do is they're going to hold these bad chemicals. One of the areas that's under a lot of research right now is salt. For rain gardens that are more civic and that are located where highways or roads that are salted in the winter, right next to those, and these rain gardens are going to get a lot of salt that washes into them, and salt actually will it dissolves quickly and it will get carried down through the water into the aquifer because there isn't a lot that holds salt. But turns out that cattails are very good at holding salt. They will absorb salt, very salty water. However, the salt is still in the dried, leaves and tissues of the cattail once it dies at the end of the season. And so plants that have absorbed this kind of thing do need to be specially harvested. And, I don't think you even, with a simple residential rain garden, you probably don't even need to do this every year, because in the winter you want to leave grasses and tall weeds and stuff like that up to create habitat and to create a seed source for birds throughout the winter. But every so often you're going to need to harvest that plant tissue and probably bring it to more of a hazardous waste type facility. It can maybe be burned with in a facility that has really good scrubbers and that sort of thing. As far as the soil and filtration medium goes, rain gardens are a new enough practice nowadays that we hardly have any that are 25 or 30 years old. And this is something that I know it's being researched, and we're going to have to figure out what to do. Same thing with, sludge that's polluted sludge that's pulled up from the bottom of harbors and that sort of thing. Rain garden planting filtration medium will probably need that same kind of treatment. And then, after 25 or 30 years, you replace that. So it's a new area of study.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking us on a tour of your rain gardens and sharing all of your experience. These are great tips, and we will definitely be sending out the recordings so anyone can go to that Yukon website that you recommended. So thank you so much for sharing your experience and your great information, Amanda.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining the webinar today, and I hope your rain gardens are very successful.